Welcome to the Well-Seasoned Librarian podcast. This is a very special Hanukkah week, and we're going to kick off the week of Hanukkah with two guests that we've had on before. This is also season 9, episode 1, and I thought we'd start the new season with a really great week. So we're going to be having Faith Kramer of the book 52 Shabbats, who we've had on the podcast before, and also BETH A from Oh My God Yummy website. I'm really happy to have them back. I've just enjoyed having any chance to talk to both of them again. Having them both on today together was just a treat, hearing them talk to each other, and I just really loved this episode. I have a very warm space in my heart from it. If you're not familiar with BETH A, she grew up on the East Coast before moving her family to Northern California, thousands of miles away from the traditional Jewish food she was raised on. She attended the University of California, Berkeley, where she received a degree in business and later pursued a marketing career in Silicon Valley. In 2010, Beth realized she preferred pita chips to computer chips and launched her own food blog, Oh My God Yummy. Through her blog, she reconnected with her love of cooking and her passion for documenting her family's multicultural food traditions. BETH A has been featured in the New York Times, Los Angeles Times, San Francisco Chronicle, San Jose Mercury News, as well as many blogs and podcasts, including KCRW's Good Food. She also co-leads a popular virtual cooking group, Tasting Jerusalem, focused on Middle Eastern cuisines and ingredients. I'm so happy to have Beth on the program again. Also here today is Faith Kramer, who is a food writer and recipe developer, concentrating on the foodways, history, and customs of the Jewish diaspora. She develops recipes and writes about Jewish customs in food, as well as travel and global ingredients. As a columnist for Jay, the Jewish News of Northern California, she writes articles on food and cooking along with original recipes. Faith has taught cooking classes on food from around the world, presenting programs on Jewish customs, celebrations, and holidays, and led food-related walking tours that explore the economic, geographic, and political underpinnings of the food, as well as how to use international ingredients in their contents. She lives with her family in San Francisco Bay Area. So we're going to go right to this wonderful podcast where we get to have these two wonderful authors on talking about Hanukkah. I hope you would love this as much as I loved making it. I just really had a great time. This is very special to me. I think it's going to stand out in my memory of all my podcasts as one of my favorite. Without any other ado, I'm going to go ahead and go right to it so you can listen to this great thing. And I just want to also remind you that we're going to have a week of guests on this week that are going to be all about Hanukkah. We're going to have BETH A tomorrow, Faith Kramer the day after, and we're going to have more guests later this week. So stick around this week. We're going to have a lot of good stuff. And also, if you celebrate Hanukkah, I want to wish you and your family a very happy Hanukkah. Welcome to the Well-Seasoned Librarian podcast. I want to welcome you to a very special podcast today. I'm speaking with two authors I've had on the program before who are very much welcome back. Beth, Faith, thank you for both for coming back to the podcast.
Nice to be here.
So glad to be back again, Dean. Thanks for having us.
For our listeners who are unfamiliar with Hanukkah or may have little understanding of it, can you tell us in your own words about the holiday and what it means to you?
Beth, why don't you go first?
Sure. So I always say to people that Hanukkah to me it's not in the context of Jewish holidays, the big important holiday, as maybe Christmas is to, and other holidays at this time of year are to people who celebrate that. It's kind of a joyful holiday that happens to fall usually near Christmas, and therefore is a great opportunity for families to offer something really fun, especially to kids, to do it this time of year. At least for me, again, this is my perspective. I have always lived in places that were not predominantly Jewish. And so while everybody else was taking their 2 weeks off from school and decorating their trees and all that, I was never participating in that directly in my family, which is fine. And Hanukkah for many people is just an opportunity to remember a wonderful story, whether it's completely true or not, of something that happened a long time ago that revolves around 8 nights of miraculous oil. And it's a great chance to get together for me with friends and family, light candles, tell this story, share my Judaism with other people. And for kids, it's super fun. You play dreidel, you light candles, you get gifts, you eat fried foods. It's just a joyous occasion, and it's a great story, whether it's all true or not.
So this is Faith. I grew up in the greater New York metropolitan area where there were a lot of Jews, and Hanukkah was a big deal. I mean, stores would be I think they had a ratio of like 2 Christmas displays for 1 Hanukkah window. You know, I mean, it was all over and everywhere. And so I didn't grow up with a sense of that this was a minor holiday. I didn't grow up with anything but the kind of the magic of the lighting the candles, getting the gifts. Although you're in my house, you're just as likely to get a pair of socks. So office supplies is something really cool, like a toy. And of course the latkes. And my mother was very, very proud that she used a blender to make her latkes, where my grandmother had hand grated her latkes. And I'll never forget, I was out playing. She called me in and she said, "Oh, I have some milkshake. Do you want some?" It was not a milkshake. It was blended potato. But, you know, it was fun. I really associated more with childhood than I did as an adult. But as an adult, I started learning more about the meaning behind Hanukkah and the story behind Hanukkah, about assimilation and independence and religious freedom, and the Maccabees and the Maccabees' relationship to the rabbis. And I started going down that path. And then when I started studying Jewish food history, I became entranced with all the different variations on fried foods, on dairy foods, on celebratory foods that are used for Hanukkah. And I guess now I'm grateful it's 8 days, because I could do 8 different kinds of Hanukkah menus.
That's awesome. And this is Beth. I love sort of the difference of, because of how we grew up, but I agree with Faith completely that there is so much more that I've learned about the holiday as an adult, especially through the lens of food. And I really now I just love the light. I really love the light and the magic, even inviting neighbors over who don't celebrate Hanukkah normally and are so thrilled to stand there and say the prayers and light the candles and hear the stories. It's a little mini magical moment. And if I may share with my beloved dog, who is not with us anymore, he would stand there and insist on being picked up and stare at the candles as we lit them too. I swear this is true. And we took pictures of it. So the lighting of the candles to me, and watching the Hanukkah each night as we add another light to it, is that is never a dull or overdone moment for me. I love it.
You know, Nadine, can I take a minute and let's define some things for some of your listeners who may not have grown up with these traditions? Okay, right. So the base story that all of us grew up as kids and have discovered alternative meanings to now that we're adults is that there was a civil, Anashwas, who was a Syrian general, Assyrian Greek general, took over the what is now, the traditional land is, Israel and Judea, and he prohibited he prohibited the Jewish worship. And some people went along with it because they, these are the conquerors and this is what you have to do. And the family known as the Maccabees, which means the hammers, started a civil war against this assimilation and against this religious intolerance, and eventually they won. And when they won, they went to relight the menorah in the temple, the famous temple in Jerusalem, and they only had enough light for one night, and it would take 8 days to get more oil, and supposedly the oil lasted all 8 days. So that's why a menorah is part of our Hanukkah celebration, and we light candles. and we light 8 candles with 1 helper candle called the Shabbats to commemorate this. A traditional Jewish menorah that you might just see as a decoration would only have, you'd only have 7 candles to light on it. So the special Hanukkah menorah is called a Hanukkah, which is the word Beth just used. We talked about dreidel, which is a top game. And the top has 5 sides, Beth, am I remembering that right? And in four sides. And each side tells you to put in some, your wager, take out half a wager, whatever it is. And it's a game that's often played with chocolate candies wrapped to look like coins, which are called gelt. What else did we touch on that people might not know instinctively? Well, as other things come up, Beth and I will pop in and we'll define things.
Yep. Yeah. Thanks, Faith. That was great.
Okay. And so because of the oil, foods fried in oil, like potato pancakes known as latkes, are traditional, and because Beth mentioned about fried foods, as well as dairy foods are traditional. And the dairy foods come from another tradition in the 13 or 1400s. A lot of the original texts didn't exist in Eastern Europe anymore, and some sage or rabbi somewhere misunderstood when the story of Judith happened and put it as part of the Hanukkah and Maccabee revolt when it belonged in a different time period. But because of dairy foods became kind of meshed with the holiday, it just stayed there, whether the story did or not.
So it's not just, for everyone listening, this is Beth. It's not just that sour cream tastes fantastic with a crispy potato latke, but it's actually a traditional thing to eat.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, you're keeping kosher and you're eating brisket or chicken or something like that for dinner, then you have to use your applesauce.
And kosher refers to the Jewish dietary laws that separates meat and cheese, among other things.
Do either of you have any specific fond memories or stories from your childhood celebrating Hanukkah?
Besides slurping down my mother's potato mashed, shredded potato. I'll give you a second. I just like being here with my family. My husband always turns off all the lights and we just sit and stare for like 10 minutes at the there's something about the darkness of winter here in the Northern Hemisphere and having the lights go. And I think that's why there are so many holidays that happen in the winter, because we need that light. We need that remembrance of light.
Absolutely.
Yep. And yeah, for me, this is Beth. I think I have stronger memories of Hanukkah with my kids than I do as a child, because really for me, we didn't really make that big a deal about it in my home when I was a child. But we have always done, various events with our own family, with our friends that we call family. And really, though, I think what is most impactful to me is watching the Hanukkah, the menorah lit with an extra, a new candle every night. And without fail, every year I turn the lights off. I try to get the most beautiful picture of it I can. I just love watching the candles burn.
Do either of you have different traditions now that you have families that you had when you were younger?
This is Beth. So really, in a way, yes, because I honestly, we really didn't make much of it when I was a kid, at least not that I can remember. And we were just far enough away from the rest of our family. So we were in Western Massachusetts, and the rest of the mom's family, she had 5 brothers and sisters and all the aunts and uncles and cousins. They were just far enough away that we didn't really spend Hanukkah with them. So I think we really pushed it a lot more in our home to our kids when they were younger. I used to always go into their classrooms in their schools. And actually, I just bought my grandniece my absolute favorite Hanukkah book, The Hanukkah Bear, which I used to bring in every year. I'd bring in a little dreidel that Faith was talking about earlier, and some gelt, had to make sure it was peanut free, gelt, a dreidel, and then I would read the Hanukkah Bear book, and everybody enjoyed that. And I loved doing that. I just, and now I think we still get together with family always for Hanukkah. And well, we skipped the last couple years, but this year we're doing it again. And then we have our friends who are kind of, our Havara family, and we get together with them. Sometimes we all bring our Hanukkahs and put them around the table, try not to burn down the house, and watch, 10 or 12 of them burn at the same time. Love doing it. It's really, for me, it's about being with friends and family, and oftentimes, as I say, sharing it with neighbors who don't know the traditions and absolutely love to be a part of it.
Nice, thank you.
I would say growing up, we had a electric menorah in the window, so we got to turn, we'd fight over who got to turn the bulb so it would go on that night. And my mother had her traditional, like a candle menorah that, I don't know, maybe it was a wedding present or something, I don't know. And we had that. And I still remember it sitting on its piece of aluminum foil. But the only food that was ever made was the potato pancakes, the latkes, and Mom would make that with a saucy pot roast or brisket. And I still do that. But I've gone down the path of finding out all these other kinds of Hanukkah foods, or foods that are kind of celebratory for different reasons. So I might also make my challah fritters from 52 Shabbats cookbook, or I might make a sufganiyot jelly donuts. And I already had kids in like kindergarten or first grade when I found out you could do jelly donuts for Hanukkah. It wasn't as prevalent as it is now on the West Coast. And I thought, I never have to drag my electric fry pan into a classroom and make latkes ever again. I just stopped at the store and picked up jelly donuts.
Nice.
And then, one of my favorite Hanukkah foods is a Persian herb omelet known as kuku, K-U-K-U.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
so that's fun to make, especially it's kind of lighter with all the kind of heavier foods that come on in the season. And I've experimented with some fritters from India and the Middle East and things like that. But what's become kind of a Hanukkah tradition for my family, and my children are grown, are we make tamales.
Oh,
And
nice.
that started because, we make the recipe from 52 Shabbats. Friday night dinners inspired by a global Jewish kitchen. And so we make the masa, and we use either chicken fat or vegetable oil, or my favorite is to use triple refined coconut oil. I think it gives it the best flavor and texture. And then I make a spicy beef and dried fruit stew known as simis, which is very Ashkenazi, very Eastern European. So I do put chipotle peppers in it, so it's very spicy. And we wrap that in the tamale. We wrap that in the tamales and we steam them up. And this year, our big tamale party is actually the night before Hanukkah because of scheduling, but we try to do it every year. And it's a lot of fun. And the whole idea came to me. We have so many blended families right now. And I work with Building Jewish Bridges, which is a local multi-faith, interfaith, multicultural Jewish organization. And at my bequest, she asked her members, what do they do that's kind of multicultural for the holidays? And there was one Mexican grandma who always made tamales for Christmas Eve, and she had a Jewish grandson, so she made kosher tamales for him. And that just kind of set me going. And I thought, that's such a wonderful thing. I just wanted to incorporate that in my tradition.
I love that.
That's terrific. Well, we usually have, this is Beth, we usually have very traditional foods when we get together with the family for Hanukkah, because I think everyone doesn't eat those so often. But one of the things we make this time of year that really has nothing to do with the oil part of it, but just became a tradition like 30 years ago, we started making rugala, which is a like little rolled pastry And it's made with like a very rich cream cheese. Mine is cream cheese, sour cream, and butter in the dough. And that for us is just something we started doing when the kids were really, really little. And it's really not Hanukkah for us without some rugelach, even though there's no oil in it, there's no frying involved, but that's just a tradition that we started doing together as a family. And we'll have them every year, no matter what. There's always rugelach, and those can be, they do great on a holiday cookie swap kind of table environment too. We have friends, they're actually all Jewish, but they love to make Christmas cookies, and it's a homage to one of the moms who's no longer with us, who used to do all the baking by herself. Now we get together as a group and do it. And one of the things we absolutely have to bring is our rugelach. And even the woman who we do this cookie swap for, her name is Hermine. Before she passed away, she told us our rugelach were better than hers. Please bring yours when we do the, when you do the cookie swap. So anyhow, that's a non-traditional tradition for us. And, really they're wonderful any time of year, but this time of year, I usually make, I don't know, around 200 of them. And then start the dough
That's
making.
a lot of rugelach, but
Yeah.
But I just wanted to chime in here, Beth, and say that rugelach is rapidly becoming an official Hanukkah cookie. And I don't know if it's because it does have the dairy. American recipes for rugelach do have dairy in it usually cream cheese and butter. And you're adding the sour cream is like yet another addition to it. Israeli and European rugelach is a yeasted dough, but I'm seeing it more and more as an official Hanukkah cookie. And I don't know if it's because mainstream food media are trying to identify more Jewish food to present this time of year. But more than that, I really think it's because people just love this cookie, and it's an excuse, and it's a special occasion cookie. It's not quick to make, and people just love it. So it's a good excuse to make it and eat it. Much like you start seeing Hamantaschen, which is a Purim cookie for a spring holiday, late winter, early spring holiday, that you start seeing it year round just because people love it.
Yeah, that definitely be true. And I guess I am seeing more and more rugelach at this time of year. It's just, we just love them.
And you have what kind of recipes for rugelach do you have in the Essential Jewish Baking Book?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So I have the apricot chocolate rugelach in my cookbook, which is the Essential Jewish Baking Cookbook. And on my blog, I have that recipe as well, with step-by-step photos. But I also have a cranberry orange rugelach, which of course came about when we had our first, I'm sure it wasn't the first, but the first Thanksgiving that really majorly impacted my life, because I always host Thanksgiving. And then basically we had Hanukkah the next day. But anyways, it motivated me to come up with a cranberry orange rugelach. So I have that on my blog as well. And I have a cranberry jam that I give you alternatives, but I make the cranberry jam for Thanksgiving anyways. It's delicious and it's easy to make. So I incorporated that into the rugelach and incorporated some orange zest into the dough. And those are two of my favorites. And I know, Faith, you have a really interesting one that you just developed.
Yeah, I my first published rugelach recipe is on foodandwine.com, and it takes my husband's Aunt Lee's traditional recipe, and I kind of give it a Middle Eastern, Near Eastern spin with date syrup and dates and tahini and chopped nuts, and it just changes, and spices like cardamom and cinnamon. So it changes the flavor profile, because that's where my mouth is happiest.
Yeah, same. That's why Faith and I get along so well. Those flavors make me very happy too.
I don't know how anybody could hear this podcast and not get hungry. My stomach's growling just hearing all this. Are either of you aware of any misconceptions about Hanukkah that you've ever heard?
Oh, I think the biggest one is the ones that the people, my kids' friends used to think they got like Christmas 8 nights a week. I mean, it's
Oh,
the level of presenting is not that present, let's say.
yeah.
I think that for someone like me who came from an area where Hanukkah was a big cultural celebration, celebrated commercially to be equal to Christmas. It's hard to tell people it's truly a minor holiday. It's not a holiday that's in the Torah, which is the Jewish the Jewish Bible or holy book, if you want. It happened later than the events in the Torah described. So it's a Talmudic holiday, I guess you could call it. But it's just the perspective on it. And then most people, they don't look behind the miracle of the 8 nights of oil, which to a rational mind is a little weird. And as opposed to the symbolism that's going on in the other parts of it. So I think the biggest thing for me was to switch from it's this big cultural holiday to understanding its placement in kind of the Jewish calendar and the Jewish year and the Jewish liturgy. It's very different than what I grew up with. It's not giant blow up menorahs in the store window.
And this is Beth. This is a logistical mistake or misunderstanding. Some people aren't aware that the Jewish holidays move around because the Jewish holiday calendar is based on the lunar calendar. So that's why we could have Hanukkah starting on Thanksgiving one year and starting on Christmas, well, the next year, not necessarily exactly, but those extremes happen. And it really just depends because we're not, it doesn't happen on the 25th or on the 18th, the same every year. It moves around. And I think that's really confusing for people. I had a neighbor recently give me a Hanukkah card like before Thanksgiving because she was at Trader Joe's and Trader Joe's already had the Hanukkah cards out and she didn't want to miss, so she bought it.
And last year Hanukkah was at the end of November, so
correct. So it can be very confusing for people, and I think also therefore, sometimes you might find an event scheduled like on the first night of Hanukkah that you really wish wasn't scheduled that night, but it's hard sometimes for people to kind of keep up with the moving around of the, of the holiday, but that's just how it is. And it isn't really, and I think the other thing, Faith and Dean, is it's not really one night more important than another. I think it's people will celebrate, maybe with a bigger group on one of the weekend days that it happens, because that's just easier. But every night it's just kind of nice to, to take out the Hanukkah and add another candle and light them, even if it's just a few minutes of prayer and standing around. It's not necessarily a big deal. It's just fun and pleasant and enjoyable.
How did the quarantine affect your being able to celebrate Hanukkah?
Well, I'll go first because we were expecting our first grandchild in London, England. I live in California, Oakland, California, and we got out of we had just left town to get for that. So we were quarantined. I mean, we were quarantined for 2 weeks in England, and so I mean, there was no Hanukkah for us last year, at least not one that we celebrated outwards. In 2020. In 2021, we had a Hanukkah party we went to, and then there was then it became obvious you shouldn't be going to any more parties because we had the resurgence. So it was family oriented, but Hanukkah is a family oriented home-based celebration anyway. So it works out fine if you can be in your home and you can celebrate it. It's not like You need to go to, there's no special service you need to go to in the synagogue. There's no special place you need to go to worship it. It's a home-based holiday.
Yeah, for us, I think every holiday was affected really the same way, and that whatever we did with our family and friends really wasn't happening unless we decided to do like a candle lighting on Zoom. We were really just celebrating it at home, with, you know, whoever was here. So, you know, I think it was the same, kind of the same effect as for every other holiday that we were used to being together with, you know, either immediate family or family that, or friends that we really consider family. We just weren't doing that. We are still continuing to be, you know, extremely safe. We did have Thanksgiving this year. We are having Hanukkah with our immediate family, immediate extended family in the Bay Area. I'm in San Jose. On Sunday, I'm really looking forward to that. But we're still being really cautious. We'll all test before we go, and try to be pretty careful moving into that. But yeah, it was a little more lonely than normal, I guess. But it's not like we would be together with family and friends every single night anyways. Most nights are, you know, lighting the candles with whoever is at home, maybe with a neighbor or two coming by as well. So kind of the same sort of isolation situation as really every other holiday. The effect was
Yeah.
from COVID.
Although we could always hope for a Hanukkah miracle where everyone gets together and everyone has a negative test, and then they come home and they're still negative.
Yeah.
Not the Hanukkah miracle. You know, we talk about candles, Dean, and this is Faith. We talk about candles, but you know, for most of the history up until, I don't know, last couple hundred years or whatever, it was even less than that, maybe, it was oil. It was little pots of oil that had little wicks in it that people would light, which is even more of a connection to what we were talking to about the miracle of oil. And when we look at Hanukkah foods and oil, we see that the tradition is much stronger in areas that had access to olive oil.
Right.
Right. So we're talking about the Jews that originally were from Spain and the Iberian Peninsula, Sephardic. We talk about the Jews that lived for thousands and thousands of years in Italy and Greece. We're talking about the Jews that never left the Middle or Near East, the Mizrachis. They always had access to oil. So they have a huge tradition of oil-based fritters and all that kind of oil, you know, fried in oil food. In fact, they say the Egyptians are the one that discovered that if you fried a food in oil, it would kind of puff up without the need for yeast. And they also credit the Egyptians, I believe, I think I've got this right, with the discovery of, you know, a commercial as opposed to a wild yeast because of their beer making. But so the Jews from Eastern Europe, when I'm an Eastern European Jew, and I really wasn't exposed to, I was, you know, the New York ghetto, not ghetto, but the New York kind of Jewish cultural Eastern European food I grew up with, which is kind of Eastern European Jews food on steroids. Everything is bigger, more meat, you know, as opposed to, you know, it's not a cuisine of poverty like it would have been in Eastern Europe. You know, we have they would use duck fat, goose fat, and later chicken fat to fry things because oil wasn't really available, or they could use butter, you know, but those are more limited and more expensive fats. So you just didn't see as much of this, the whole frying in oil or deep frying in oil kinds of foods. It was very different. And the first fritters in Eastern Europe were probably just like grains, like maybe barley or something like that, or buckwheat that were fried together. And later, maybe some shredded vegetables. Turnip was really popular. And then when the potato got introduced in the 1600s sometime, eventually that was adopted as the lockup vegetable of choice. But it's very different than the story of oil in the other areas where olive oil was prevalent.
Right. And I just, Dean, I just did an event for the International Association of Culinary Professionals that I called Donuts Across the Diaspora, but I talked about and cooked in 45 minutes 3 kinds of donuts. And it is true when you start studying fried fritters and donuts that different parts of the Jewish culture will make, like in Israel, they're not talking about latkes, they're talking about sufganiyot. But I find the
Jelly
sufganiyot
donuts.
Pardon?
Jelly donuts. That's what
Jelly
souffle-
donuts.
Yeah.
And then I talked about a Moroccan donut, which is not strictly for Hanukkah, but if you were a Moroccan Jew or in that region in northwest Africa, the Maghreb, you would make something called sfinge. They make it all year round, but if you're a Jew from that area, you're going to make this donut called sfinge. If you are a Sephardic Jew from Spain, or maybe even from Greece, although they have another version of the fritter, you're probably going to make something called bimuelos. So you're right, Faith, though, all of those areas have wonderful access to olive oil and probably always have. Oh, and you could talk about Italy, you could talk about the bombolino, where the wonderful potato makes its arrival in the donut. You put a shredded potato in the donut dough. And that's another.
And also the arancini, the rice fritters in Italy too.
Right.
The rice fritters.
Yep.
Yeah.
This episode is sponsored by Culinary Historians of Northern California, a Bay Area educational group dedicated to the study of food, drink, and culture in human history. To learn more about this organization and their work, please visit their website at www.chnorcal.org.
Beth, can you talk a little bit about how the jelly donut ended up being the probably the most beloved symbol of Hanukkah, not just to women who don't want to make potato pancakes in an electric fry pan in their kids' kindergarten classroom, but to many people everywhere. So it's the first mention of it is like in the 1400s or something. I don't know. Can you take the story forward?
That's actually a really good question that I think you might be better at answering than me. I don't actually know. I know from a food perspective, when I was studying recipes and figuring out what I was going to do in my cookbook, because I do have a sufganiyot recipe in there, and it can be baked or fried. To me, when I was studying all the sufganiyot recipes and deciding what I wanted to do, it felt like it was really actually similar to a Polish paczki in terms of the type of dough, but that is Eastern Europe. So how we made that leap and how it became, and maybe because Israel is so, there are Jews from all over the world in Israel. So that might explain how we though ended up on the jelly donut as the choice. I don't know if I know that. I know it more from a food perspective.
Basically, we can thank the labor unions in Israel. So Polish Jews brought over their version of what was called the Berliner and made it popular. And then the labor unions, the commercial bakeries started making this. There's a much more elaborate process. I think it's very doable for a home cook. I've made them often. It's if you don't have a fear of frying, or you're willing to do a baked version like you offer up, it's not that difficult. It's, time consuming, but it is a time consuming, labor intensive process of making souffleur or jelly donuts. And the labor unions supposedly started promoting them as the Hanukkah treat of Israel to give themselves job security, if you will. And there's supposedly one bakery in Israel that in the month leading up to Hanukkah sells 200, I can't remember, it cannot be, it must be 250,000 jelly donuts total. It couldn't be per day, but I think
Wow.
yeah, it's got to be per total. But in the month leading up to Hanukkah, that they'll sell 250,000 of these. And the the Israeli fillings are wild. Everything, we do
Yes.
jelly, maybe we'll do a little Nutella, maybe a little caramel filling, but they just go wild. Their fillings are just incredible.
Well, yeah, you could liken it, if we want to use this analogy again, but the way right now, if you go through your Instagram feed or wherever you look at your pretty pictures of food, the crazy, wonderful, fantastic decorations you're seeing all over cookies, well, you're seeing those on the jelly donuts in Israel. I mean, it's in the trays and trays of these wonderfully decorated and then beautifully and then filled, as Faith said, with just all kinds of amazing fillings. I don't eat them that often. I'm very, very happy with my jelly filled versions, but I'm sure, I will say I would like to be in Israel at least one time during Hanukkah and get to participate in that.
Both of you have written cookbooks in the last few years during the pandemic. Can you both talk about your books to our audience and kind of talk about what it was like to release these books during the pandemic?
Sure. I guess I can go first. This is Beth. I wrote mine very quickly, and it was great that it was during the pandemic because I could just put my head down and shut everything else out and think about nothing but my 50 essential Jewish baking recipes nonstop, pretty much 24 hours a day until it was done. But it was interesting because so my book is, as I said, the Essential Jewish Baking Cookbook, and really think of it as like a little bit of a primer on if I was an Ashkenazi Jew, a Mizrahi Jew, a Sephardic Jew, what might be the things that I grew up eating in my kitchen that my grandma made, or that the traditions I might want to pass on to my kids. Those were some of the things we were thinking about when we came up with the recipe list for the book. And that's what people tell me often, that, oh my gosh, I always wanted to make, my grandma's challah. I always wanted to make an onion board which called a pretzel, you can't find anymore. I always wanted to make, the bizcochos that my grandma made, but I didn't know where the recipe was. I'm so glad to find them. But the interesting thing about the pandemic was, we have all of this connection by social media and email and texting and all that. But sometimes you physically would want to talk to people or give them food to taste. And we figured out ways to do it. I mean, I connected with people all over the world. I had testers all over the country. And then when I'd have like a group of baked goods for people to taste, I had a group in the neighborhood. I'd text them, and then we'd set up a table outside. I mean, it was really during some of the worst part of the pandemic, and be like a 6-foot table, and we'd sit on one end and the baked goods would be on the other end, and they'd come over and they have to take their mask off because we learned you cannot chew and taste with your mask on. So we made some we got creative, let's just say, with handling all of that kind of stuff. Most things happen virtually anyways, but I had to do a lot of, and thank God for all of this technology we have, because I was texting with people. I have a couple of close friends who are Sephardic Jews, and their moms are still alive, and some other relatives. And I would text them with questions. They'd text their relatives. When I was working on the recipe, I'd send them pictures. They'd send it to their mom or their grandma or their auntie. Does this look right? And, they were sending me their pictures. And, it just were, some of that probably would have happened that way anyways. In some cases, I might have, flown and tried to be in the kitchen with these people or driven, and I couldn't do that. But I made it work. And, I'm really proud of what came, what the end result of all of that hard work. And I'm so glad that I had the opportunity to do it. But I think the tasting part was possibly the most challenging, and a lot of shopping. I wasn't really going into the store. So it was, where's the best place to order the pick delivery from? Are they going to give me the right ingredients? Those kinds of things too. But it all worked out.
Nice. Thank you.
So my story is a little different in that COVID did give me space to work on this because I was literally grounded. My husband and I travel maybe 6 months a year. So I like to think I could have done this cookbook anyway, and I was planning to do it anyway, but COVID facilitated my being home and having my, sitting in my chair and actually working. But my background is that for 13 years, I've been a recipe columnist for the jweekly.com, which is a online and print Jewish newspaper here in Northern California. And I had a significant amount of recipes that gave me a place to start. And I was looking for recipes that either that originated in those columns or were written especially for the book, or I hadn't have recipes I had never published that express I'm not looking to recreate a classic. I'm looking to adapt and adopt different food ways, and that identify as Jewish for me, and create new big flavors, modern taste recipes. And I had my challenges with COVID. Sourcing ingredients was really difficult. I was very lucky that I was able to get delivery from a shop that had a wide assortment of international ingredients that I could use. And I ended up finishing the book and finishing the recipe testing in London. And I was really, really concerned, would I be able to get my Jewish ingredients and my Middle Eastern and Near Eastern ingredients in London? And we did have to take our shopping cart and walk like an hour to the Jewish neighborhood to get those ingredients, but we were surrounded by excellent Turkish and Middle Eastern markets. So that part was really much easier than I ever imagined. And I was very lucky that when the book published, things had started to open up again. So I was able to have in-person events, and my book, 1 year publication birthday. My book's birthday is the 14th, and I just it's just been a year full of fun events and meeting people and talking about Shabbat and Jewish food and the cookbook, and it's just been a great year. So I feel very lucky I had time to write the book, and I feel very lucky it came out when there was a time that you could get back together and meet with people, even if it was limited or through you were masked or whatever.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Faith. I feel like my timing was both wonderful and not. I didn't have as many in-person events as I would have loved to have, but I have started doing some of that. And I think my first big in-person event was at Omnivore Books. I know, Faith, you had one too. And oh, what a joy that was, not only because Omnivore Books is such a wonderful cookbook store, but just to see the whites of everybody's eyes and look into people's eyes and see them responding in the same room, and shaking their head and understanding, or raising their hand and asking a question, and me being able to respond. It was just an absolute joy. And I love doing in-person events. Faith and I did one for a temple fundraiser in Napa in August, I think. And again, what a thrill it was to be in the room. And, I did challah braiding, and to have people respond to what you're doing as you're doing it like that, it's just wonderful. And then to be able to talk to them about the book, have them come and buy the book after they see what I'm all about and the content of the book is about. It's just a really wonderful thing. And I hope that we can continue to stay open and doing these kinds of things, because I really enjoy the interaction with human beings in person.
Dean, there's one other consequence of COVID I forgot to mention. My book was stuck for a month off the coast on Long Beach, and it missed Hanukkah. Hanukkah was very early.
Oh my God.
But yeah, so we had to we had to push the publication date to December 14th. So I totally missed Hanukkah. And now I had a strong pre-sale for people who thought they'd be getting the book for Hanukkah. And I did try to let people know that if they wanted, I'd send them a book plate. But then we did sell out our first run in about a month once it was published. So there was a really great reaction to it. But I had totally forgotten that one of the reasons the world was so open is I had another month while the book was in a container off the coast of Long Beach. And the other thing I like to say is about virtual presentations. My reach has been so much more incredible because people are so accepting of virtual presentations, whether they're Zoom or YouTube or whatever now, Facebook Live. People are willing to do that, where before maybe it was a second class presentation to them. So I've been able to get my message out and the story about my book and the story behind the recipes and about Jewish food and all that on a much wider audience. But I still do love an in-person. One of the things I love most about going in person is trying to talk to as many people who are there as possible and finding out, do they cook? How do they celebrate this holiday or Shabbat or whatever? What brought them there today? What's their favorite food? Have they ever used this ingredient or that ingredient? And I just really enjoy that connection.
Yeah, those are great points, Faith. I adore in person, but I was also so grateful for the virtual events that I was able to do. And they live on in some cases. So I did an event for the National Museum of American Jewish History last November before Hanukkah of the baked and fried donuts. And they did it on Zoom, but it also streams to Facebook, and you can still go to their Facebook page, look at their videos and see the video of me making those donuts. I mean, it lives on. There's like 8,000 plus views on it. It's one of their most viewed videos. And I mean, I am also so grateful for that. And I think that that's one of the really positive aspects of what has happened with COVID, is that I think we have it, as you said, Faith, accepted that it's not a second class event. When it's a Zoom event or some kind of virtual event, it can be just as wonderful in its own way. It's different. It's not the same, but it's wonderful. And as a bonus, in many cases, it can live on and be there for people, beyond the date that it happened. So that's pretty awesome too.
So I try to make my in-person events something that's very tactile. I mean, I haven't done holo braiding. I certainly could, but it's not my wheelhouse. I'll call you in for those. But
it is mine now.
I like to do spice mix workshops. My book contains several recipes for spice mixes from the Global Jewish Kitchen, from Yemen, from Ethiopia, from the Middle East and elsewhere. And we make those spice mixes. We talk about the book, we talk about Jewish food, we talk about the Jewish spice trade, and we make the spice mixes and people go home with the spice mixes. And I think that's, I think that otherwise, why come out? It's just as easy to hear people talk on Zoom and you don't have to get dressed up or drive and find parking or whatever. So I try, that's my thing. I try to make it an experience they couldn't otherwise have.
And I want to say this is maybe an addendum here or an add-on or a corollary, but in my book was all about essential and keeping to the traditions and also trying to keep the ingredients to what you can find in your local big box store. But one of my loves, if you look up at my blog and also my Facebook, is that I love Middle Eastern ingredients. And I also love the fact, and that's kind of broadened my view of, as Faith has said, what really is Jewish food. And it's so much more than the Ashkenazi Eastern European food I grew up with. And in fact, I think it was 2014, they were doing this special talk series at my temple that was sponsored by another organization, and the name escapes me now. They wanted me and my partner on my Tasting Jerusalem group, Serene Wallace, to do a class. And they wanted it to be very traditional, kugel, that kind of Eastern European food. And And Serena and I kind of pushed back because we really wanted to introduce some of these flavors that Jews in other parts of the world, including the Middle East, are familiar with. And at first they were reticent, but then they let us go ahead and do that. And we did some of the recipes kind of from the Jerusalem cookbook, that kind of thing. And I think we did majadra, and we did these
So that's rice and lentils, majadra's rice
yes,
and
thank
lentils.
you, rice and lentils. And we did the thumbprint with the cookie with the date and walnut filling that also has orange blossom water and rose water in it. And and we did the eggplants with the chermoula, and everyone loved it. People loved it. They loved being introduced to these different flavors and kind of that connection that you like, even if you grew up like me on the East Coast originally and then moved west, and you know all this Ashkenazi, very meat, as you said, Faith, meat forward, potatoes, all that kind of stuff. There's so much more to Jewish food and from other parts of the world. And anyways, I absolutely love all of the flavors and the spice mixes Faith is talking about. It's life-changing when you start incorporating that into your cooking. Taste
Do either of you
changing too.
do either of you have recipes from your cookbooks that you like to make, particularly in this time of year in the winter time?
Well, my family demanded, my son and his partner were over this weekend, and I was going to make a pot roast, and my favorite is the pomegranate molasses pot roast or brisket.
Yay.
And my husband's favorite is the Ethiopian flavored spiced pot roast. And they pretty much demanded the Ethiopian one. So I just made that Saturday night. I would say yes, the people want because the food in my cookbook is the food I feed my friends and family. It's what they ask for. And it's been a very interesting conundrum because I have a column, and every 2 weeks I have to come up with new recipes, but they want the recipes they always get, which are the recipes that are codified in the book. So I have to balance out new recipes with old. I wanted to just talk a bit. It just flashed in my memory that the Dutch butter cookie that has spread all over Scandinavia and the world started as a Hanukkah cookie. So for what it's worth.
I did not know that.
Well, that's according to Gil Marks, who is kind of like the official / unofficial food historian of the Jews, the late Gil Marks, the late wonderful Gil Marks.
I ordered one of his books and used it regularly while I was working on my cookbook as one of my many sources to try to understand where to start with a recipe. Yeah. Wonderful historian of Jewish food.
He was a caterer, a chef, a food writer, a rabbi, and a historian, kind of like all in one package, and he left us way too soon.
As far as from my book, I mean, of course, I would tell you to absolutely look at the sufganiyot and think about baking if you don't like frying, because they're really wonderful. But kind of thinking more broadly about just this time of year and what's kind of wonderful. There is a challah bread pudding recipe in there that, something, if you have leftover challah, and I know people always joke if I say that, are you kidding, whoever has leftover challah? But if you do, or if you don't, just, make an extra loaf or buy an extra loaf and make this. It's really like almost like an overnight French toast kind of situation. And it's so warm and comforting. Or if you're having people visiting and you want to have something, you throw it together the night before and just get up in the morning and throw it in the oven and have a hot breakfast ready for people. Or really just look at all the different breads. The breads are, most of them, all of them really are very approachable. Bread is so wonderful in the winter with soups and stews and things like the pomegranate, molasses brisket that Faith is talking about. It's nice to have some bread with it. Look at the rye bread. There's 3 different challah recipes in there. Give it a shot. You don't have to be super comfortable with all kinds of crazy techniques or yeast. Just give it a shot. I used to be afraid of dough and afraid of yeast, and look at me now. So if I can do it, anyone can. That's what I always tell people.
Yeah. And I think that we get in, we know what we know and we're afraid of what we don't know. But in this age of being able to see videos on how to do everything, and with really good instructions like you have in Beth's book, there's no need to have a fear of frying, a fear of yeast, a fear of phyllo dough. I think that it's just break it down to steps and go slow and give yourself time and space, and you can make just about anything.
Totally agree.
I want to end by asking both of you, what's next for both of you?
Well, we're traveling again, so I'm always looking for new foods. And in fact, we just came back from Sicily, Naples, and Rome, and I had this amazing sauce for pasta that's basically onions and white wine in Naples. And for some reason, they call it Genovese sauce, and I end up making a pot roast out of that, which was amazing. Lots and lots of onions. So I continue to travel and to look for new ideas and visit Jewish communities where I can. I'm looking to maybe start a newsletter, and I'm working on the concept of what I call maximum wow. So big flavor with the minimal effort. So you get lots of good kind of weeknight, everyday cooking, because Shabbat is the holiday that comes every week. And I do give make ahead steps because most people have to work on a Friday anyway. But I'd like people to enjoy these flavors all year round, all week. So 365 days, not just 52 weeks.
And for me, I definitely want to write another book or more. The question is, there's a few on the table of what that might be. I mean, obviously, there are not only 50 essential Jewish baking recipes, so obviously book 2 could easily be an option. I also have been in, as I said, I have this group called Tasting Jerusalem with I do it with a lifelong friend and food person, Serene Wallace. And, we absolutely are in love with Middle Eastern ingredients and cuisines, and often try to see how we can adapt those, as Faith mentioned earlier, to not only learning about where they come from and why they're used the way they are in their origin, but how we can get used to them and apply them even to other foods that we make and use them in our kitchen every day. So, and I also my family itself, my immediate family is a multicultural family. So my husband is Korean American, and his parents were born in Hawaii and his grandparents were born in Korea. So not only do I feel like it just happens to personally be super important to me to leave behind a legacy of my Judaism, but it's also really important to me to leave behind a legacy, at least to my family, of my husband's family's food heritage. So on my blog, you will also see kalbi, which are grilled Korean short ribs, and mandu, which are Korean dumplings, and Portuguese sausage, rice, and eggs, which is very Hawaiian. And there might be a book in there somewhere about my multicultural food traditions. So I definitely want to write another book. I'm also spending a lot of time on a platform called Kitsch, KITTCH, which they're calling the sort of food platform for a new generation. But basically, I'm live streaming cooking demos. And so you can find me over there. I love the interaction with human beings. I love being in front of the camera as well as being behind the camera. And I'm working on my blog like crazy, omgyummy.com.
I was going to give a shout out for her blog. Did you just say the omgyummy.com?
Yep.
And then also the Tasting Jerusalem group on Facebook is a really great group of people and a great group of recipes. And as well as you have a page for your blog on Facebook as well.
Correct.
And I have a website, faithkramer.com, faithkramer.com, and people could reach me there. And right now it's a pretty static page about my book, but I'm hoping to make it live and include more recipes and photos and information about the food I find while I travel there as well as to launch the newsletter. and as well as at jweekly.com, where I have my recipes archived there.
And I'm looking
Beth.
forward to your newsletter, Faith.
Beth and Faith, I want to.
So it's one of those things, right? You have to sit down and do it. And I've been kind of trying to figure out what my scope should be and what I want to cover. And I'm not going to do it till I have that figured out.
You'll get there.
Yeah.
Beth and Faith, I want to thank you both for being on the podcast. I've really enjoyed getting a chance to talk to you. This will be airing on Hanukkah, so I want to wish you both a very happy Hanukkah.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Dean, for this opportunity.
Thank you, Dean, so much for having me back. And Faith, it's always a pleasure to be talking with you and to have the opportunity to share both of our books and our interesting and different perspectives on Jewish food and food in general. This was great.
That was my conversation with Faith Kramer and Beth Lee about the tradition and the foods of Hanukkah. Hope you enjoyed that as much as I did recording it. Please be with us this week as we talk to more guests on Hanukkah week. We're going to have tomorrow, we're going to have Beth Lee talking about her book and her website, OMG Yummy. And then we're going to have Faith Kramer, who's going to be on talking about her book, 52 Shabbats, and also her website content as well. And then on, Thursday, we're going to have Kim Kushner talking about her book, Modern Table, and website as well. And that's going to complete the week. I hope you have a really great time this week. I hope if you and your family are celebrating Hanukkah, I want to wish a very heartfelt, happy Hanukkah to you. And I hope you enjoy these episodes that we're providing this week. I hope that you can share these episodes with friends on social media. We love it when people introduce new listeners to our audience, and we always encourage people to share this on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, anywhere you want. Hope you all have a really great week and you're making some wonderful holiday foods this week. Keep on cooking.